The strangest part wasn't the missing name. It was the missing shape. In the summer of 2023, I received a box with no return address. Inside was a topographic map of southern Missouri, circa 1894, brittle, yellowed, and meticulously marked with surveyor's lines. Only one thing stood out: a perfect circular clearing drawn in red. It was labeled only with a set of initials, RC, 1891. But when I checked satellite data from the same coordinates, that clearing didn't exist. Not anymore. I drove out the next day. The forest was untouched. No trails, no stumps, no signs of logging. But the trees in the center of the circle were different. Taller, straighter, too uniform. When I stepped into the area marked on the old map, my GPS glitched. Compass needles spun. My drone lost signal at just 20 feet overhead. And then I found the marker. It looked like a boundary marker, but not from any culture I recognized. No dates, no language, just a spiral with 2 dots. I photographed it, recorded GPS, and marked the spot. But when I returned 2 days later, it was gone. Same coordinates, nothing but leaves. I started digging through archives, trying to find anything with R.C. tied to early Missouri expeditions. Only one name came up: Rowan Claiborne, a Civil War-era engineer who vanished in 1891 during a land survey near the Ozark foothills. His last known letter included this line: "The land hums. Geometry guides it, but they buried the entrance." Claiborne's notebooks were confiscated by the Army Corps of Engineers. Rumors says they described resonant chambers underground that responded to sound. He never returned from that final survey. Locals whispered about the ground that sings, a hill where compasses fail and time feels slow. But those were just stories. Until now. After I posted about Claiborne online, I got an encrypted email. No name, just a download link. Inside, a modern LiDAR scan. From above, the clearing looks flat. But underground, a dome. Perfect. Hollow. Aligned with true north. And right above it, buried just beneath the surface, another object. A spiral carved in stone. Still there. So here's what we know. There's a structure hidden beneath Missouri's hills. It was found over 130 years ago and erased. But not forgotten. The spiral is a message. A map. A warning? I don't know yet. But I do know this: it's not natural. It's not on any official record. And whatever it is, someone wanted it buried. That raises only one question. What happens if we dig again? After seeing the LiDAR scan, I couldn't sleep. I needed more. Not speculation, proof. A few days later, I drove to the University of Missouri's archival library. The staff was polite, but hesitant. One assistant told me most 19th century survey materials had been reorganized. But after hours of digging, I found it, a weathered notebook misfiled under botanical surveys. It belonged to Rowan Claiborne. Inside were pages of field sketches, coordinates, hand-drawn measurements, and something else. A shape, a circle, just like on the map. But this one had writing around it. Not English, not Latin, something older. Claiborne called it the hollow stone. He described the ground as vibrating, as if something deep below was not asleep, but waiting. He referenced pressure changes, shifting magnetics, and, most surprisingly, sound resonance. One page listed low-frequency tones and what appeared to be instructions on how to replicate them using brass rods and stone chimes. Then, on the final page, coordinates logged. Entry chamber sealed in ritual. Must not be disturbed until alignment. That word stuck with me, alignment. I took a chance and shared a redacted version of the notes with a trusted geophysicist. He ran simulations based on the location and soil density. According to the model, there should be nothing there. No cavity, no tunnel, just solid limestone. But when he used Claiborne's frequencies, just for curiosity, the data changed. A pocket formed on the model, artificial, layered, like something was there, but only revealed by sound. He stared at the screen and whispered, "It's phasing in and out." We returned to the site at night. The forest was still. No birds, no insects, as if nature itself held its breath. We used a directional sound emitter, low-frequency tones based on Claiborne's chart. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the ground shifted. Not visibly, not physically, but we felt it. In our feet, our chests, like walking across a bridge you can't see. Then came the vibration, and something more, a hum that didn't come from our device. It came from below. We scanned the ground again. There was an opening. Shallow, almost imperceptible. A flat stone, roughly 5 feet across, flush with the earth. No markings, no edges, until the light caught it just right. And the spiral appeared. Same as the marker. Same as the journal. And then it pulsed. I placed my hand on the stone. It was warm. I don't know how long we stood there. The hum faded. The spiral disappeared. The forest returned to silence. But something had changed. The entrance wasn't theoretical anymore. The chamber wasn't legend. And Claiborne was right. Some mysteries shout. Others whisper. This one speaks in silence. And in shape. The spiral on the stone wasn't just a symbol. It was the key to a larger pattern. A map. When I laid Claiborne's journal sketches over the LiDAR scan, the shapes aligned perfectly. Circles, triangles, arcs, all built around a golden ratio spiral. Not decorative, deliberate. It was as if someone, or something, designed the structure to resonate. That word kept coming up. Resonance. Sound. Frequency. Geometry. It wasn't superstition. It was math. We used audio pulses to scan deeper into the dome beneath the surface. What came back wasn't just shape, it was response. A living pattern, a message in numbers. Certain frequencies made the return signal stronger, sharper, almost as if the structure below was designed to respond to particular tones. At 432 Hz, a pitch long associated with harmonic resonance, we got the clearest return. And with it, something else. A secondary signal. Quieter. Slower. A pulse at 618-second intervals. The golden ratio again. It was like the chamber was echoing us intentionally. Not passively. Actively. That pulse wasn't random. It grew stronger with every frequency aligned to Fibonacci ratios. Every tone we played shaped the scan like fingers pressing from the other side of a wall. Someone was responding. We weren't the first to notice this. In 1974, a classified Air Force acoustic experiment near the same coordinates was abruptly shut down. The report was sealed, but a former technician wrote anonymously in a forum thread back in 2009. He described hearing tones in the woods as if the trees were vibrating. He called it the geometry of silence. Others in the thread dismissed it, until someone posted a blurry photo of the same spiral glyph etched into rock. That post vanished within 24 hours. I followed the math. Every angle, every length between markers on the site, every carved shape, it all aligned with sacred geometry. Ancient builders from cultures worlds apart used these same forms. Pyramids, temples, stone circles. But this, in the middle of Missouri, what was it doing here? And how did it end up buried? That's when I remembered something Claiborne wrote. They didn't build it. They found it. The stone was singing long before men arrived. What if this wasn't the work of ancient engineers, but ancient listeners? What if this was part of a network? Not man-made, but inherited. Our team triangulated the spiral markers with satellite elevation data. The geometry extended beyond the dome. In every direction, buried nodes, stones, hills, forming a massive, invisible pattern. We called it the silent web. No one documented it, but it was there, waiting. A pattern too large for one civilization or one time. The geometry was no longer silent. It was pulsing. It was guiding. And the deeper we listened, the more it sounded less like a place and more like a machine. Not one of gears, not one of wires, but of harmonics, of memory, of design. And I began to wonder, who designed it? And why did they leave it here? There's a hollow south of Thomasville that no one talks about. Not in papers, not in reports, but you can find it if you know what to listen for. Locals call it the quiet place, not because it's peaceful, but because sound dies there. Birds go silent. Wind stops. Even your own footsteps feel muffled. You don't notice at first, but when you leave, that's when you realize it had been too quiet all along. I didn't find it on a map. I found it in a journal. Another one, sent to me anonymously, wrapped in oilcloth and sealed in wax. The initials were burned into the leather. M.C. 1933. Inside, a story of a schoolteacher from West Plains who disappeared after years of collecting local folklore. Her last entry was a warning. The hill doesn't just whisper. It listens. I've seen what happens when people answer. I followed her trail. The journal mentioned strange symbols carved into a red oak near a ridge southwest of town. I found it, barely standing, split by lightning, but the glyphs were there. The same spiral. But now, another mark beside it. A pair of vertical lines flanking a circle. I didn't recognize it, but I'd see it again, and soon. The trail grew steep. The trees thickened. And then, the silence. No birds. No crickets. Just the low thrum of pressure in my ears. It was like stepping into vacuum. I set up camp near the hollow's edge. I wasn't alone. Trail cameras placed along the path picked up figures, not animals. Tall, thin, blurred shapes that moved silently between trees. They were there for seconds, then gone. One frame showed a single open eye, etched in light. That night, I dreamed of stone corridors and ringing bells that left no sound. In the morning, I woke to find a new spiral carved into the earth next to my tent. I hadn't heard a thing. I took a soil sample. The results made no sense. Unnaturally high concentrations of magnetite, a mineral known for interacting with electromagnetic fields, and something else. A crystalline compound with no match in any known database. A geologist I trust reviewed the report. Her first comment, either this is synthetic or it's not from this planet. She laughed after, said it was probably contamination, but I wasn't laughing. The deeper I went into the hollow, the more my instruments glitched. Compasses spun. GPS failed. Battery life halved. But the recorder, the one piece of gear that always worked, picked up something I hadn't heard with my ears. A voice. Not speech. Not language. A low rhythmic chant, looping over and over like it had no beginning. When I reversed the audio, it stopped. Everything stopped. The forest fell completely silent. And then I heard my own voice played back, saying a sentence I'd never spoken. It's not buried. It's dreaming. I left the hollow at dawn. I didn't speak the entire hike back. I couldn't. Something lingered in my head, like a tune I didn't know how to hum. When I got to my truck, there was a message scratched into the windshield. Heard. No footprints. No mud. Nothing but the word. I haven't been back. But sometimes, late at night, I replay the chant. And each time, I think I hear a second voice underneath. One that gets clearer every time. It's not in English. But somehow, I know exactly what it means. And it's calling me back. Near Birch Tree, Missouri, there's a mine that doesn't appear on any modern geological maps. No signage. No trailhead. Just rusted iron, earth, and decades of silence. But it's there, hidden beneath a false ridge line, sealed with thick steel reinforced decades ago. My lead came from a retired cartographer who claimed he once drew it into an army map and was told to remove it the next day. He mailed me a single page, copied by hand, a diagram of tunnels. One chamber was circled in red, labeled only with 3 letters, M, N, S. Machine, not structure. When we arrived, the air changed. Metallic. Still, we followed what remained of the mine rails inward, until they vanished into a wall of sealed stone. But part of the rock had collapsed, revealing a vertical shaft behind. Old wooden rungs descended into black. The last person who entered here, if the logbook in the tool shed was accurate, went down in 1961. He never came back up. We descended 90 feet into the dark. No sound, no movement, just the cold and a pulse, subtle but constant. At the bottom was a door, not man-made. The stone was too smooth, too perfect. Etched across its face was the spiral. But this time, it wasn't alone. Surrounding it were 9 symbols in a perfect circle, each distinct, each glowing faintly when touched. We tried photographing them. Nothing showed up. But when we scanned with magnetometers, they spiked. These weren't symbols. They were functions. One of the symbols matched something Claiborne had drawn in his final journal. He called it the breath loop. He believed it was connected to oscillation, sound-based activation. So we set up directional speakers and played tones, one at a time, carefully. Each time, we'd wait. On the 6th tone, a deep harmonic hum, the chamber resonated. The stone vibrated, and the spiral began to rotate. Stone shouldn't move like that, but it did. The door didn't open, it folded. Folded inward, without hinges, sound, or pressure. Behind it, a room unlike anything I'd seen. Not carved, not natural, constructed. Walls of smooth, iridescent black, not stone, not metal. Patterns shimmered like liquid geometry. And in the center, a machine, spherical, suspended, completely still, but alive. We didn't touch it. We didn't dare. It emitted no heat, no sound, But instruments showed a pulse, one that matched the golden ratio timing from the earlier resonance tests. On one wall, barely visible, was an etching, a diagram of Missouri, with 12 nodes marked across it, all connected to the central site we now stood in. Not a map, not a record, a network. And this was the core. But the final line on Claiborne's page said one thing more. It doesn't wait to be activated. It remembers. The deeper you go into the Ozarks, the more things disappear, not just people, but history itself. I wasn't supposed to find what I found. Not in a local university's military archive annex. Tucked behind irrelevant microfilm reels and scan war budgets was a folder marked Survey M17, 1968. The contents weren't in any database. No index, no citation. Just 48 pages of topographic surveys, strange elevation anomalies, and a name scrawled in red pen. Geodetic outliers. Possible interface sites. The name on the survey, Colonel Ira McCandless, was hard to trace. No public military record after 1970. But inside that folder were photographs. Grainy black and whites of men standing on ridges with measuring rods, and in some cases, next to stone markers that glowed under infrared. I digitized the coordinates and compared them to our field sites. 7 of them matched the silent web exactly. That wasn't a coincidence. Someone had already mapped the system, long before us. One photo caught my attention. A man standing near a flat, stone disc, partially dug up. He holds a Geiger counter. The reading is off the charts. Behind him, scribbled on a field chalkboard, Node 12B, active. This wasn't geological. It wasn't archaeological. It was operational. The language of systems, not soil. And then, at the bottom of the folder, a memo. Typed. Redacted. But legible enough. Subject, subsurface oscillatory events. Southern MO recommends cessation of exposure beyond 72 minutes. Cognitive interference observed. Cognitive interference. They knew. That phrase sent me down another rabbit hole. Archived newspaper clippings from 1969 reported 5 cases of sudden mental deterioration in young survey cadets working in Missouri's southern counties. One claimed he heard the hum of the earth speaking. Another kept repeating numbers, always in spirals. The last was institutionalized and never spoke again. All 5 were pulled from records by 1971. Back in the field, we returned to one of the marked outlier hills, labeled G.O.-4 in the survey. Buried in limestone, we found a metallic ring. Thin, cold, seamless. When touched, it pulsed faintly, like the machine. We set up EM sensors. The field around it pulsed in a Fibonacci pattern. And under the dirt, sonar revealed straight lines, extending outward. It was another node. Still alive. We stood in silence, absorbing what it meant. Someone had built this. Someone had mapped this. Someone had tried to contain it. And then someone had erased it. But not well enough. Because now, it was waking up again. And we were the ones listening. The pieces were no longer separate. Claiborne's journal. The hidden chamber. The harmonic door. The forgotten survey. The symbols buried in oak bark and limestone. It was all one thing. A system. A resonance network. The old machine wasn't just a machine. It was a core. And what it was connected to stretched across counties. Possibly the continent. It operated like a circuit, not electric, but geosonic. Frequencies moving through the land. Energy passing between nodes. We had discovered only fragments. Until we found the map. It wasn't a map in the traditional sense. But when we layered all our findings, something clicked. Every spiral, every anomalous signal, every point where silence thickened and compasses failed. The spirals were arranged in a Fibonacci lattice, a natural form found in sunflower seeds, nautilus shells, and galactic spirals. Missouri's ground wasn't random. It was tuned. We tested frequency output at multiple sites and found interference patterns. Echoes, beats. When the pulses aligned, they formed standing waves. And when they hit exact phase, something changed. In the center of the interference pattern, one final point lit up. A node we hadn't identified. No records. No journal entries. Just dense forest. No trails in. No roads near. We called it Node 0. The origin. We gathered a small team and hiked in. The air thickened with each mile. No birds. No breeze. Static charged the air. Even our thoughts felt louder. We found it just past dusk. A clearing. perfectly circular, 10 meters across. The ground was flat stone, carved into concentric rings. In the center, a raised plinth, and on it, a spiral disc. But the air around it shimmered, as if the space itself were vibrating. When we stepped into the ring, all sound vanished. Our equipment shut down. Watches froze. But the stone began to pulse beneath our feet. We didn't speak. We couldn't. The plinth glowed with spiraling light. And in a flash, we saw something, not with our eyes, but inside our minds. A vision of the entire web activating, energy surging, spirals rotating across continents. And above all of it, not a structure. A signal, repeating, pulsing, waiting. It wasn't meant for us, but we heard it. And now, it had heard us. We thought we were explorers, investigators, but we were part of the experiment. Everything we'd touched, the spirals, the nodes, the frequencies, it had all been designed to respond. And once the response began, it couldn't be stopped. The ground beneath us vibrated like breath. The trees pulsed with low-frequency resonance. A deep harmonic tone began to cycle through our bones. It wasn't just sound. It was memory. Our own thoughts distorted, looping in patterns. I heard my name repeated in a voice I'd never known. I saw images I couldn't have imagined. Cities beneath the bedrock, machines larger than mountains, networks stretching into stars. It wasn't just Missouri. This was everywhere. And it had always been here. We had reactivated a part of a system too old to date and too vast to comprehend. When we stepped back, the spiral disk rotated one full revolution and locked into place. A click echoed not just through the clearing, but in the earth itself. And beneath it, we heard a tone. Low, steady, alive. We looked at one another, but no one could speak. Not because we were afraid, but because we understood. The network was now listening. And something below Missouri had just awakened. Something had changed. After that final tone, the silence didn't return. Instead, there was a feeling, not heard, not seen, but deeply felt, like pressure inside the soul. We stayed motionless in the clearing. The light around the spiral grew warmer. The plinth hummed, not with sound, but with intention. It had waited, and now it was listening. The air shifted. Beneath our feet, the ground felt hollow. Using ground-penetrating radar again, we found the impossible. A tunnel beneath the stone, perfectly coiled like a nautilus shell, descending nearly 400 feet into the earth. We hadn't seen it before. It hadn't been there before. Or it had, but was cloaked, shielded, as if it waited for the network to awaken. We followed the spiral. The tunnel walls weren't stone as we knew it. They were smooth to the touch, warmer than the air. They hummed. Engravings spiraled along the ramp. At first, it looked like language, then patterns, then memories. One of our team whispered, "I've seen this before." But he hadn't. Another began reciting numbers he couldn't have known. Precise, rhythmic. It wasn't just a tunnel. It was a recording, and we were the stylus. At the base, a chamber, circular, silent, still, and floating at its center, an orb, black, polished, defying gravity. It pulsed gently. When we approached, every sensor died. Lights flickered, but inside our minds, the signal sharpened. No words, just patterns, spirals, a feeling of presence, not of someone, of something, a design, a directive, a question. What we called the silent web was never silent. It was waiting for someone to answer. And now it was asking, "Do you understand?" We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Every part of the journey had been leading here, from Claiborne's half-burnt journal, to the geodetic surveys, to the stone rings in farmers' fields. It was all a breadcrumb trail, left not to reveal a treasure, but to prepare us. And here, in this impossible place, the true function of the network revealed itself. It wasn't built to contain. It wasn't built to power. It was built to remember. We were inside a memory machine. Not human, not alien, just aware. And in that awareness, it had stored everything. Every thought, every cycle, every echo of life from before we had words for it. The orb pulsed faster. A low harmonic filled the air, and the walls came alive. Symbols burned gold. Stone shifted. Another tunnel opened. We weren't at the end. We were at the beginning. And whatever lay deeper inside this ancient construct, it wasn't meant to be found all at once. Because some knowledge must be earned. Some answers must be lived. In Missouri, this unassuming heartland was more than a location. It was a key to something older than time. We stepped forward, not knowing if we were explorers, witnesses, or merely echoes being recorded in return. But one thing was certain. This was no longer a mystery. This was a message. And somewhere beneath the forests of Missouri, it had finally been received.